This is episode 4 of the Social Experiment podcast. I'm Andy.
I'm Mark.
And we're talking about brand identity and our value in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic. We should probably explain, we're a wee bit behind with the release schedule, summer holidays, all that sort of stuff. So we'll get back on track for those that are...
we need to have holidays, right?
Yeah, but there might be some people that have been sitting waiting with bated breath for the next episode.
Yeah, and they've been listening to it on the beach. They've been listening to our...
Maybe some did. It'd be quite nice.
They will. So we're back on track.
Yep. Should we talk really quickly about where we are for the people that are watching this, not just listening?
It's a cracking venue.
So it's a place called Graft. It's 241 West George Street in Glasgow, and it's one of these serviced office spaces. It serves a number of different purposes. It's a sort of private business club, so you become a member and then you get access to the place. But it's got everything, and we're in one of the little kind of meeting rooms today.
And we're going to have a scoot around and have a look around.
You'll get the tour.
We're going to get a proper tour.
See, I'm serious. I'm really impressed with this place, and I'm probably going to sound biased. Full disclosure, I'm now doing a bit of work for them. But what's cool about that is I like working with businesses and brands and individuals that I actually like what they do. Mm-hmm. So that's the case for this place. It's absolutely cracking in here.
Yeah, and liking what they do is, I guess, part of the theme for what we're talking about today. So that's going to be great.
Graphlife.com, check them out. Understanding your value to the marketplace, I think it can be a struggle when you're on your own, when you work on your own. Do you agree?
Okay, so I guess when you start out, and I remember when I started out, you kind of assume that everyone else in business knows all about it. They know what their own value is, that they're kind of like grown-up businesses and you're just starting in your business. So you're trying to figure yourself out. You're trying to measure yourself in every sense. And the most important part of that is, what can I offer and what's the value of it? Ultimately, that's going to translate to what should I charge? Well, that's a complicated question. That can be a complicated question. So I guess we'll partly cover that today. I
totally agree. It's the charging thing is really, really interesting. So I've moved. My business has totally evolved in the last 6 or 7 months, and the thing that I'm focusing on, my passion at the minute, is photography. I've always dabbled with it, and I've had a few paid photography jobs as a kind of offshoot of what I've done for clients in the past. Can you take some photographs of that? Yeah, and I get paid. But I'd never called myself a professional photographer, because I feel that's moving into a place where there's a lot of expectations of what you bring to the market, and I thought I'm not really there yet, but I'm trying to get there. And I'm on a Facebook group that's really popular with both sort of amateur, serious amateurs and professional photographers, and a regular question is, I've been asked to do this photo shoot, how much should I charge? And it's a question that so many of them have got, particularly when they're starting out. I'm just brand new. I've never done one before. How much should I charge? Whereas if you watch a YouTube video that's an interview with Annie Leibovitz, one of the most famous portrait photographers of however many years, she's never ever going to talk about, I've been asked to photograph Sir Paul McCartney, how much should I charge? They never think about it because they know the value they bring. And basically whoever's hiring them knows the value they bring. So it's because you probably don't even ask her what it is, you just get the bill. So
yeah, if you have to ask, you can't afford it.
Exactly. So obviously I'm at one level, really starting out as a so-called professional photographer, and she's at the other level, and it's figuring out the value that I bring and how much should I charge for it.
So in the groups that you talked about, who would typically be your clients?
No, these are on the group. It's other guys like me that are, either serious hobbyists, wannabe pros, or new pro photographers. So for the
photography offering that you're offering, who would
I'll be the client, right? Okay, for me, well, at the minute, so the barber shop. Remember the first episode? That's my client, and that's been great, really good exposure, and I've had some interesting potential leads for more work through that. Another client would be I'm going to be doing a photo shoot soon for a woman that sets up like balloon displays at parties. So she's doing a baby shower, and she's asked if I'll come along and do the photos for it. So it's entry level stuff at the minute.
Sounds fun. So they're going to be slightly different types of values, slightly different types of client and customer until you find what kind of people you want to work with and who wants to work with you. That's going to make it more difficult, isn't it, to figure out what the value is. I suppose if you were offering, like if you're selling a car, say, the product's already made and you're comparing it with other cars. So we need, and people who are entrepreneurs, I guess, need to think about what are the different variables that are going to have an impact, or what the different ways that you would tweak up or tweak down or change or develop your pricing depending on different things.
Yeah.
So if you've got set products or set processes or set services, that might be sort of time bound. So you might charge in terms of time. But I think one of the important things that you said there was value. You know, what's the end vendor going to get?
I think the weird thing about value, right, and it's a sort of, I think there's so many layers to it. There's the kind of self-doubt, like is what I'm bringing to a client worth what I think it's worth, or is it worth even more to them? So that whole thing, you know, the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So you might have a skill, but it might be a fairly limited skill. It might not be fully developed yet, and you might decide this could be a viable business offering. So it could be photography. We'll just run with that analogy. You know, you're all right at it. You know that you know a wee bit more than the basics, and you know that you can take and edit a better photograph than the owner of a cupcake selling bakery could on their phone
and on their own.
Exactly. So in that scenario, what you offer them is valuable because you can show them a photograph that you've taken and edited that looks way better than what they could do.
And it's interesting because if you develop the skill, you're great at it. It's easy for you. It's fun for you. But it's maybe taken days, weeks, months, years to develop your skill. It's hard for them because they're not practicing it, which is kind of interesting because, you know, that's the whole point of why they'd want to work with you, that you can offer them that. They can't do it for themselves. But it might be easy for you in one sense, but it wasn't easy for you to develop the skill. It wasn't easy for you to develop the skill. So it's that thing about, you know, I'm sure you know the old story about you get an engineer in to fix the boiler and he goes in, gives it a tap and suddenly it starts working and charges like
300 quid.
Whatever. I was going to say $10,000. And they say, well, I'm not charging that, you know, and it's like, so what's the punchline? You know, it took me 10 seconds to fix it, but it took, 10 years to figure out where to tap.
Exactly. So that comes back to the perception of value. So you and I could look at that and go, what, we charge $10,000
well,
to do that?
I know we both work hard. I know how long I've taken to develop my skills. And when I think comparably about other industry standards, so my area of interest is, again, would be coaching, leadership development. So I know, for example, many of the associations for coaching, the formal associations, how much they would prescribe or encourage for continuous personal development, for example, how many hours you should keep learning to hone your craft. And I do way more than it would be the typical sort of developmental advice. That's partly because I love it. I mean, like I've said in other podcasts, I'm a geek that way. That's why I wanted to get into this industry. I love that stuff. So I'm typically developing way more than you would than professionals are advised. So that's one way that I think about the skills that I'm developing. And the things that are easy for me, or fun for me, or interesting for me, and I know they're hard for the client. The other part is that when I'm working with a client, so I'll be working with managers and leaders, for example, who then will influence their team. So I might engage with one person that can have a value that's 10 times the value because they're interacting with their team. And if they develop, let's say, their team dynamic or to develop their leadership skill. So let's say I go in and I do a couple of single day or multi-day programs for them or something like that. you know, that might take 6 days in total, let's say, over however long a period of time. But the benefit that they get from that will be months and years that will play out in their organisational culture. So those are the types of things I'll start to think when I think about value.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so when I first started in business, maybe our viewers would be interested in this, our listeners would be interested in this. When I first started out, the easiest way to benchmark your value would be to look at other coaches and consultants and to think, well, what do they charge? But then I started to realise I'm probably developing a lot more than most. Not all coaches and consultants, but I would say more than average. I think when I look at what other coaches or leadership development specialists claim, and then I check, well, what can I do? How do I compare with that? But over time, I've moved away from that. It's less about comparing myself with other consultants, and it's much more about what do I think I can deliver for this client, and what do I think the value, how would I construe that value? And I've got different indicators that would help me do that.
So this is, I think that's because as you were talking earlier on, that's one of the things I was thinking, is it a good idea when we're in business, you either starting out or been in it a long time, to compare ourselves constantly to the competition? And I think if you're a really, really super secure person and you're not overly attached to your ego, you probably don't really worry what anybody else is doing. You're just very, very centred and you kind of know where you're at. I think it's the ones that maybe struggle with having a bigger ego that will be constantly comparing themselves to make sure they're still number one, make sure they're still the best, and feeling the need to kind of brag about it, humble brag on LinkedIn or whatever. But I think it's a fairly common thing at the start to have a look, well, what are my competitors doing? What are my competitors charging? How do I compare to them? I don't think it's a good philosophy to continue with that mindset. I think you figure out what you're about, what your brand is, and you just stay true to that.
Well, it starts to develop. So I might look at a peer, let's say, or an apparent peer, another coach or leadership development specialist. Now I'll look at their business and I'll look at what they claim, but I'll also try and dig deeper. I'll try and think, well, what's their training? How long have they been in the business? You know, what does that claim actually mean? Does it stack up? Now that's early on, that's still a comparison. And you're thinking, well, what kind of training and experience have I got? But going through the motions of that helps you figure out that I can start to think about my own value in my own terms. So yeah, it's understandable to compare yourself with other people when you start, but it's probably not a great idea to continue with that. I think the other thing is, as you mature in your own business, you start to understand the value and the impact that you can have with your clients, and that's really the important part.
Aye.
The other thing, maybe it's worthwhile considering, you know, if some of our viewers are, I think probably some of our viewers might be, let's say, more kind of entrepreneurial, let's say, interest, because we've talked a lot about those topics historically. I think one of the things, and we might have mentioned it in another podcast, but the idea that comes to mind for me is that your business and your business brand and the business value is partly what you say it is. So if you operate as an EasyJet as opposed to a British Airways, that is your brand, and so your pricing is part of your brand. I think that's an important consideration.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think it was the pilot. It may have been the pilot.
Yeah.
And
we'll be seeing it much cooler now compared to the pilot, though.
Yeah, absolutely, and better surroundings, and we'll hopefully get a better handle on the editing and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's absolutely true. Your perceived value is in direct relation to how your brand is perceived. So if you're seen as being, and I know at the minute in some of the stuff I'm doing, because I'm having to kind of reinvent myself, my new ventures, I'm kind of seen as being the EasyJet or the Ryanair a wee bit, but I'm trying to offer, and I wouldn't use British Airways as a good standard of service. I think they're crap, right? But that's a whole separate topic. So I'm maybe running sort of EasyJet, Ryanair prices, but I'm trying to offer Emirates service. And I think that's an important thing to have in business as well. It's the whole... I can't remember if the phrase is under promise but over deliver.
Sure, yeah.
But it's that mindset where you go, right, okay, listen, I'll do this for you and it'll cost you X, and the client goes, all right, okay, that's pretty good. But then you give them something even more valuable. You give them even better service, or you turn around the work quicker, whatever it may be. You throw in a little bit extra, so that their then perception of what you've given them, the inherent value of it is then elevated. I think that's an important thing to do in business. I'm not saying you do that all the time, and if it's an ongoing client, you maybe can't afford to do it all the time.
So there's something about identifying the value, which I think we've already, excuse me, started to speak about. But I think what we're talking about here is managing the value. So I think, for example, a really common thing that happens in coaching and some of the kind of one-to-one change work that I do, and I use change work in the broadest sense. Sometimes I'll help someone make a change or like figure something out, and then after they've made the change, it's easy for them. And it's like, oh, I don't know what the fuss was, and it's like, well, yeah, it was a fuss before we talked, and now it's not. Yeah. So part of the value management is helping them appreciate the value of the change that they've gone through, and therefore, why I might justify my fees or my services. Equally, in the corporate work that I do, the organisational change work that I do, some of the stuff they might say, well, it's common sense. Well, it's common sense now after you've learned it, but before it, you weren't doing it.
Exactly. It's funny that happens.
So it wasn't that common.
Oh yeah, it's just common sense.
So you have to kind of manage the value a little bit.
Yeah.
The other bit of managing the value, I think, can also be where a client says, oh, I'd love it if we could do this and we could do that, and can we do this and can we do all of that in half a day? And it's like, well, is that the best use of half a day? Is that the best way it would work? And so sometimes, because clients don't understand how things work, that's why they're getting your expertise. They don't understand the value, so sometimes you have to sort of explain that to them as well. It's managing the value. Managing
the value, and it goes back to something, I think, again, a little bit of callback here to something we talked about really early on, is doing work for free, and how it's pretty much a no-no. It is pretty much a no-no. There's a different thing for helping a friend out, or a colleague, helping them out with something. I did a bit of free work as a favour for somebody else. So the work was for a third party, but I did it as a favour to somebody who I've got a business relationship with. There's a bit of quid pro quo, and he'd said, listen, this project's come up, there's no budget for it, could you take care of it? So I did it, shot the video, edited the video. So the third party recently came back to me and said, I'm needing some more stuff done. So what is her perceived value of what I bring to her business? Zero. Because what was her budget for this project? It wasn't quite zero, but it was nowhere near where it needed to be. So she was wanting work done that could help her win an international competition that would establish her business and brand on an international level. So the perceived value to her business of the work that I would deliver, pretty much without measure at the minute. I mean, take her business to another stratosphere. Yeah, when it came down to pricing and all that sort of so it's funny that I can only take that back to the perceived value. She got the work done for free at the start, or without charge to her, and she thinks afterwards it shouldn't really cost too much.
Well, when I started out doing certain types of change work, I would, and when I was still learning my craft, I would say to clients, okay, the value of this change would be this. If it works, then you can pay me.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work, don't.
That's interesting.
Don't pay me. And a lot of coaches and agents of change wouldn't couch it that way. Have we got a band?
We've got a pipe band. I don't know whether I don't know if the mics are picking it up. But we've got a pipe band. It's passed by. That's a nice little interlude.
I was getting a Celtic rouse there.
Exactly. It's funny how, for those listening and watching, that aren't Scottish, it's really hard to describe what the sound of a pipe band does to a Scotsman. I don't know if it's in our DNA or whether it's through auto-suggestion as you're growing up. I don't know what it is, but you feel something.
It never fails, and it only takes a little.
Yep, I suppose that was the whole purpose of the pipe bands in the first place. They literally led men into battle, so it's supposed to do that. Right, let's take a quick break. We'll just make sure all our cameras are recording, and then when we come back, I think we need to talk about letting our value become undermined by worrying about what people think of us and our work. That sound good?
Sounds interesting.
Right, take a quick break. First of all, thanks for listening or watching the Social Experiment podcast. I just want to explain that podcast production is one of the services I offer via my company. Go to wearepostable.com and just click on the link for podcasts. I believe podcasts are an essential part nowadays of any business's marketing strategy. I think we're moving beyond all of the bite-sized media chunks that we're so used to putting out on social networks like Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. And I think there's a need now for businesses to be using long-form content like podcasts, whether that's for potential customers to watch on YouTube or for people to listen to in their ears or in their cars via the audio from the podcast. So I think a podcast is a great thing for your business. I've got, 14 years podcast production experience. I started a podcast in 2005. So I'd love to produce your podcast. Go to wearepostable.com, click on the link for podcast to learn more, read some of my thoughts on why podcasts are so important, and fill out the form at the bottom to get in touch with me. Okay, we're back, and so we're talking about understanding our value to the market. We've covered our pricing, we've covered comparing ourselves to competitors, we've covered our client, our customers' perceived value of what we bring. You know, we might think, oh, I can only do this, but to them, that's amazing. You know, they've got, it blows their minds. The two other things I think we need to talk about, one of them is being concerned with worrying about how we're perceived. So we've talked before about the use of social networks, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Twitter, all that sort of stuff, Instagram. And also, let me just actually check what that other point was. My mind has drawn a blank. How to express yourself with authenticity, which is kind of a big driver of why you're doing this podcast.
It's been a theme for us.
The worrying about being liked and shaping your own personal perception of your value based on how you're liked, I think is really, really dangerous as well. Because then you start to change and mould who you are to suit.
Well, it's
people.
doomed to failure, because if you start changing yourself either personally or professionally to fit everybody else's needs, you're going to you're all over the place, right? Now that's different from being attentive to your audience, other people, your customers, and providing something that's useful for them. But when it comes to values, it's, I think that's a more stable feature.
Yeah. I think that it's funny because for me it sort of ties in with the social media influencer thing, where their perception of value to the market, so their clients maybe being a clothing brand or a holiday destination, their perceived value to them is how well liked they are as influencers. Think about that. That's mental. Mm-hmm. How well liked are you? Well, how do you measure it? The number of likes I get on my Instagram post, the number of followers I've got. That is then perceived as their value to a clothing brand or a travel destination or a makeup brand, whatever it may be. The pressure that puts on them, the so-called influencer, is absolutely enormous. So then they've got to create this sort of facade of a particular type of person in order to continue to get likes, to continue to get followers, in order to continue to get work. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could just strip it all back and just be you, with your own skill set, your own abilities, and just be appealing to maybe a smaller group of people who really, really gel with you, who are on the same sort of vibrational plane as you, and do business with them? Yeah,
I think you want people to like you and to value you for who you are, right? Now that again doesn't mean that you're static, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to continue to develop. But if you're creating some kind of fantasy version of yourself, that's always going to be doomed to failure. Yep. We all do it to a certain extent. We all kind of, mask certain characteristics in different situations, and we have social etiquette, and we have all that other stuff, don't we? But like all these things, if you're doing that stuff too much, you're living a fantasy, aren't you?
It's funny because I was telling Cameron on the drive into Graff today, that this morning, I can't remember why, but I ended up looking up 2 YouTube influencers whose content I'd come across about 5 years ago, and I'd had a look at what they were doing 5 years ago. 2 English guys, with their own YouTube channels, Instagram accounts, all of that sort of stuff, and they both on their websites described themselves as influencers. That was even before the kind of whole social media influencer thing really became a thing, and there was just something about them that I remember at the time thinking, they really pissed me off. I couldn't really put my finger on what it was. It was the whole every day is the best day ever. Look at the amazing lives we're leading. I can't believe I've got the chance to show you bronze new men's grooming kit. It's absolutely fantastic. There was just something about it that resonated with me as being really false, really disingenuous. But it was clear that they were creating a perceived image of themselves that was going to be seen as being valuable to brands because they were so likeable to everybody. But me as a guy in his 40s, just like, these are a couple of irritating wee pricks. That's the perception I had of them. So anyway, for some reason they came into my mind this morning and I went and looked them up. Oh my God, how things have changed. Both of them have said separately on their blogs and made videos for YouTube talking about, guys, it was all fake. It was all fake, and we ended up being deeply unhappy. We were so concerned with pursuing being likeable and being liked that, you know, basically that was their USP, is how likeable they were, and the whole every day is the best day ever, all of that sort of stuff. It was fake, and one of them basically almost had a complete mental breakdown, had to completely overhaul his whole life, split up with his partner, and is pursuing a completely different journey in life. And he's basically said, I don't care whether you guys like this or not. This is who I am. I need to be true to myself. And I think that applies in business, where if we're consistently feeling we need to present this, the most successful entrepreneur ever and all that sort of stuff, and win, because we think that's what's going to boost our perceived value to the market. That's just not sustainable. Why not be true to yourself? Why not be authentic? Why not just be real?
I like it, man. I would buy into that mantra. I think you reminded me as you were talking there of organisations when they're working on their brands and their values, and they think, all right, well, we need to start getting like bean bags in, and what do you call them? These like soft play balls, and we're going to dress up as bunny rabbits at Easter, and we're going to do all that stuff.
Get a big T-Rex costume and run through the office with it on.
That, I mean, a lot of that can be really cool. It's a lot of fun, but if that's not really what your organisation's about, I'm not even sure the organisations that project themselves like that are like that all the time. How
well, they wouldn't get any work done.
How could they be? Exactly, right. So again, there's a kind of parallel that gives people a false impression that businesses are like that. When I work with organisations on their values, it's not, the issue is about identifying their values, making them explicit, and making them formal. It's not about creating values that are not there. What I mean by that is most people in most organisations, whether it's entrepreneurs or some of the larger organisations that I work with, it's not that they're devoid of values. They just don't have a vocabulary for talking about them. They don't know how to talk about their own values. And I'll just say, well, what's important to you? Like, what would be important to you? Like, so for example, if I say I value my health, I think we talked about this before. If I say I value my health, I'm going to reach for the fruit and not the buns. So my value is going to be expressed in my behaviour. You know, my health's important to me and it gets expressed in my behaviour. So often when I'm working with teams, for example, and we might do some values work because some kind of shared value or in some kind of articulation of the team values is often very good for teams, for example. So a lot of it is just saying, okay, well, if you were faced with this moral dilemma or this team dilemma, what would you do? Well, I would look out for the customer. Okay, so customer service is a value then. Well, we'd look after our peers. Okay, so, you know, peer care or whatever is our value or whatever. And it starts off really clumsy, but then you can start to narrow it down. And then once they appreciate that this always turns up in our behaviour, then what it means is if team members swap out and new team members come in, you can say, okay, well, if the new team members trying to understand, well, what's the context of this team and how am I supposed to make decisions in certain situations, you can start to use the formal values as a way of engaging them in the culture, so they can make decisions from the team even when they're in a room by themselves. So that's really important for organisations. It's really important for individuals.
Yeah, because
and it has to be something that's really there. You can't
Yep.
you can't make it up.
No, because again, I'll use that word again. It's not sustainable. If you want to project a version of yourself, so you're a one-man band, you're a solo enterprise, you're really good at what you do, but you're trying to project a version of yourself that isn't really there. Good luck keeping that up long term. You're better to at the start just be really, really honest about the skills that you've got, what matters to you, and what you bring to your customers, and build your values off the back of that, because that's who you are. Mm-hmm. Then you can continue doing that after year 1, year 5, year 10, without having to completely reinvent yourself every 6 months.
Yeah, and going back to what we were talking earlier about, do you continually try and meet other people's needs, your customers, and you keep changing your own identity? So the alternative to that is, if you know what you're about, if you know what's important to you, if you know what values are important to you, you're going to start acting congruently with yourself. You're likely to attract the types of clients that have the same values, the clients that want to work with you. If they've got different values, we were talking earlier off camera about, a company that might see things a little differently. They have a preference for how certain people should be in certain situations. Well, they're going to attract people and they're going to turn other people off. So the question is, who do you want to work with? Some of that theme, informed when I created when I say created the brand, I did create it in the sense that, I formalized it, but a lot of the material was there already for my own company, Think Distinct. For me, it was about, like I've said this before, like a distinction is not something, like people always say, we want to do something like different. And I say, well, you don't want something different. You want a difference that's going to make a difference. You want something that's going to be progressive and developmental. So that's a distinction. Something that's the difference that makes a difference, right? That's what a distinction is. So I thought, okay, so that's part of the brand. That's already in the brand, Think Distinct. And that has that connotation of being better, progressive, or whatever, standing out from the crowd. But the thing is, some people won't like that. Some people are going to go, well, that's just kind of not my thing. And actually, when I created the company name quite a few years ago now, a lot of people said, not sure about that. Even people that kind of like my stuff, well, I'm not sure about that. But what's interesting was, once I started operating with it and it became synonymous with what I was doing, it connected to say, you could only ever be Think Distinct now.
And that becomes your personal brand identity as well, because it's based on who you are and your approach to things in business and probably life as well. And what you bring to your clients. So then it's this continual cycle. Yeah,
and so people who worry, like, what will you call your business? Or how will you brand certain things? People who worry about that stuff as well, and people who overly worry about that, I think they're missing something. Well, you perhaps know more about this than me. I think it'll never come down to just the name, or just the website, or just the colours that you choose, or just the business card, or just the elevator pitch. We were talking about elevator pitches. If I'm going to try and capture something in 30 seconds, it's going to, make super clear what my business is about. I don't think there's any one thing ever that will tell people what you're about. No. It should be building up a relationship, and it should be building up an appreciation of value over time.
I think it's important for people that are maybe new in business or thinking of starting a business, that the relationship that you have with client A will be different to the relationship you have with client B. There will be some crossover in how they perceive you as a service provider, but it's going to be completely different. I shouldn't say completely different. There's going to be differences.
Well, this is where you're hinting at the paradox then, right? So what's the same and what's different?
Yeah.
Now, I'm the same person that I am when I talk to you, when I talk to my professional clients, when I talk to my friends and family. It's still me, it's still the same values, but how they're expressed is different.
Exactly.
There'll be continuity in certain things, but so for example, if I'm loving with my family, that's going to play out in certain ways. If I'm loving with my clients, I have to be appropriate. It's going to work out in certain ways, right? Yep. So that's where the paradox comes in. You're not different. You're not changing your values, but you might be changing how you meet and how you encounter
how you
your
demonstrate
clients.
the values.
Yeah,
So that I think that's probably put it a bit better than I did. That's going to be, there's going to be differences. So one client will expect some things from you, and you'll deliver them in a way that you think matches their expectations or comes close to it. But a different client will maybe expect something different.
Well, I think, you'll have friends that, right, this set of friends, we would hit a karaoke. Another set of friends were more likely to like sit and chat and whatever.
Yep.
So your behaviours, because you have multiple values, so they'll be expressed in different ways with different groups of friends and with different members of the family and whatnot. So similarly, you'll have different values that are expressed with different clients.
So the thread that needs to go through, I think, all of this, right? Everything that we've talked about today, from recognising your value, whether you're a one-man band or whether you're a multinational corporation, it's the same thing. You've got to recognise your value to the market. You need to be kind of true to what you offer to the market, all that sort of stuff. Don't be shape-shifting a lot.
Right, so I would say a thing about that is it's like being true to yourself in a way. Well, let's see, is it in a way should be easy in some sense, but it's like if you're feeling like, I shouldn't have said that, or shouldn't have done that, or that's not really me, the chances are you're kind of contradicting a value somehow.
Yeah. When I do workshops, and I came to this conclusion a number of years ago, so I'll do a workshop. Maybe it's, in fact, I've got one coming up. It's for Business Gateway. So a Business Gateway workshop is different from maybe some of the other private workshops I've run. So Business Gateway workshops get a fairly set formula, and they're pitched at a certain type of small business. But what I try and do is just deliver them exactly the same way. Because see, if I don't, I hate it. I can't enjoy it. So I've got to go in and just be me. And being me means sometimes being a bit caustic, sometimes calling bullshit on certain social media trends if it's a social media workshop. I don't want to go in with platitudes. I don't want to go in with going, yeah, great guys, just do this and everything. I don't want to do any of that. Because see, if I don't hold true to myself in that way, I absolutely hate the experience, and it doesn't matter what I'm going to get paid. I need to go in and enjoy it. I need to go in and feel I can be myself. So the way I'll be when I'm talking with my kids, talking with my partner, talking with friends, a bit of sarcasm in there, all that sort of stuff, trying to be a plain, straight talker, I've got to do it. And I think if I was put in a position where it was to do workshops for an organisation who didn't want that, I would maybe do one and then go, I can't do it. Because I don't know, I was going to say I've got to be able to look at myself in the mirror. That's too strong. But that way you've got to kind of be true to yourself. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. It's like a lot of people, if they're not quite sure of the work that I do, they say, like, are you like a motivational trainer? And I'm not really sure what that is. I think it's quite an odd idea. You mean like an entertainer? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Tony Robbins.
We're going to come in and we're going to fire up your company.
Yep.
So
everybody on their feet applauding. Whoa.
So it's easy enough to get people's heart racing and heart beating, but a lot of the things that informs my approach to professional and personal development is things can be tricky, things can be tough. Identifying that, being real with that stuff. Sometimes people don't like that. It's like, no, I want all the happy clappy stuff, and so I'll challenge people sometimes, but the aim is not to challenge people to upset them. The aim is to challenge people to have them encounter themselves. I don't know if that sounds too philosophical, but like encounter like what things challenge themselves, and then develop a bit of honesty with themselves.
I remember when I first started Postable. I think it was the year I started at 2012, and I'd got. I think before the end of that year, I'd got an office in the Templeton building, Glasgow Green, and I was really, really pleased with that. It's just a tiny wee office on the first floor, and I had a room for, I think, 2 desks that were already there. It was part furnished. One of them was a massive old sort of CEO's desk. It was a brilliant big desk, and I put a wee sofa in there as well. But I remember spending ages and working really late one night figuring out what the values of this new company, because I had this big idea that it was going to be a growing company, a fast growing company, was going to have employees and all that. But to figure out what the values were, and for all that dream didn't actually become a reality and I no longer have that office, the values are still the same because I was really, really clear on what I felt I could bring. You know, I always try to be a breath of fresh air and talk straight, all that sort of stuff. Those were going to be the values. And printing out stuff, you know, you print out a kind of page where you've got a kind of mind map. Like this is going to lead to this, and having them all around the walls of the office. And I look back now and go, it was probably a silly exercise, but it felt like the thing to do at the time. And I think no matter where we are on the business journey, go through that process of figuring out what your values are, because those values turn into the perceived value you bring to customers.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of things I'm tempted to say. One is, I think we should put a coin in every time we say business journey.
I've been saying it a lot. Is it me saying it a lot?
No, I think I say it a lot as well. I know some of my viewers don't like the phrase journey. Anyway, no, I'm
okay, that's interesting.
I'm playing with that. Do you know the other thing I was thinking of? So there's this idea that we have core values.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of merit in that way of thinking about things. I was hearing myself just speak there and I was thinking about myself. It's also true that values mature. You learn about values. So obviously you learn about values from your parents. You learn about values from the culture that you're in. And there's values, you could say, there's values that I value now more than I ever did when I was much younger.
Yeah.
So you can mature with that and you can learn about values. You can learn about ethics. You know, so when you're a kid, by analogy, when you're a kid, you don't really know an awful lot about ethics or morality. You know, you kind of learn right and wrong usually from your folks. Similarly in business, you know, sometimes you have to be in a situation to figure out what's the right thing to do. But you can learn to value things. So to say that you have core values and to say that you have, you know, something that's stable doesn't mean that you're not developmental either. That's the flip side of that.
The way I see, when you're talking about that, the way I picture it in my mind is a very simple colour wheel. So a colour wheel would start with the 3 primary colours. So they could be your core values. But as soon as you start to blend and merge, then you get more colours. And that tends to be, I think, what happens with our values when we're young. They start off as very basic and very primary, but then they start to merge and blend because we realise life isn't maybe quite as cut and dried as we once thought. And we adapt and we evolve our values, but they probably still go back, they diluted down to some simple core things.
Yeah, so, and there are values that if you hold, life will test you and will show you the limits of those values. And if there are other values that you hold, life will test you and will show the merit in those values. So I don't think there are some authors, you were talking about Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. There are some interesting features in that book, but he couches his sense of kind of values in the 7 habits. He couches them as like immutable truths. Now he thinks they come from somewhere else, and you know, if you're a person of faith, you could think that.
I think he's a Mormon, isn't he?
Yeah, right. And so I can imagine how you could come to that conclusion where they come from somewhere else. But for me, it's just that this is the way life works. You know, like it's a bit like gravity. There are certain things that are going to happen, and if you have certain values or certain ethics, life's going to test it. Like, so for example, I mean, like a simple thing would be like if you instead of investing now for benefit you might get later, if you just like blow all your stuff just now, that, you know, if that was your ethic, if you're going to operate in that way, that will start to show up. Now you might be lucky, you might get through a lot of your life having no problem with that, but it's going to start to show up. Similarly, you know, if you work in business in a certain way and you think you could, I don't know, if you had an ethic where you overcharged someone, or you thought, well, I'll get away with a kind of the least I could do for a customer. If that's your ethic, that will start to show up. It will start to show up in the results and responses that you get. So I don't think there's anything universal in the sense that I don't think they're in the universe. Right? I don't think, you know, find your purpose, find your values. That's not that kind of stuff, right? It's not that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is that fundamentally we have a kind of reality we're trying to deal with, and if you operate in certain ways, it's going to show up. It's going to show up. So you're going to test your values. Now you can learn that, and some of those things can be hard lessons. Or you can you can maybe more proactively try and learn it. I try more proactively try and learn that. So let me try and summarize my position on this, because it's interesting. It's one of the benefits of doing this, I think, is
it forces you to think about stuff that you maybe just take for granted.
And I love that, and it's a big part of what I'm about, is trying to formalise my own thinking and formalise other people's thinking, right? Because it helps them sometimes. So there's a stability to your values that can be expressed in different ways. So your values can stabilise. Right, so in that sense, they're core, or they have a fixedness about them. But that doesn't mean they're immutable. That doesn't mean they're unchangeable.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me.
And that's how you can have someone who maybe engages in criminal activity, and then they see the light and they decide to change it differently. And it's not a kind of supernatural light. It's just they come to their senses, right? So there's a stability, or there's a continuity to your values, and that's really useful because it helps you. It helps you know how to measure up and evaluate different situations, to evaluate. You're using your values to measure and to check yourself. How much should I charge in this situation, or how should I behave? That's one of the benefits of values. But also your values can develop, they can mature. And really what we're saying there is you can learn new values, you can extend your values, you can learn to value certain values more than others. So there's a kind of flexibility there as well.
You said values an awful lot in that sentence.
I know.
It probably takes. I'm going to need to listen back to that and kind of break it down. I'm not saying I disagree.
So it's a kind of it's a kind of nested. No, always be free to disagree, because that's where the magic is. That's where the magic is.
That's where magic happens.
So there's a kind of nested flexibility.
Yeah.
Continuity, and then flexibility, I think, is something that I'm trying to reach for there, I think.
Okay. How are we doing for time?
20 minutes.
28. Right, we need to wrap up within 2 minutes then, or the camera's cut off.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, wow, so let me think. Email in your thoughts. So it's socialexperimentpodcast@gmail.com. Trying to get what camera to look at. It's this one. Social X on Twitter and Instagram. And if you've enjoyed this, leave a comment with your thoughts. Let somebody else know about either the video or the audio podcast. Wow, I feel
this is a learning process for us as well, right?
Totally.
Like we always say. So, what have you valued? If you valued something in particular, tell us about it, and then we'll know to do more about that stuff. If you value some stuff left, tell us about that.
And stuff you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Obviously, Andy and I kind of try and get our heads together what we're going to talk about, and we'll come up with a kind of core idea and then just run with it. But if you guys think you'd love to hear us talking about whatever it may be, something that's happening in the news, something controversial, something that's happening in business, I don't know, just let us know. It's called the Social Experiment Podcast because we're open to experimenting. See what...
we want to be social.
And we want to be social as well. Right, thanks for watching and listening.
Grand, thank you.